Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Dionne Mischler, one of the co-founders of SalesClass, as well as the CEO of Inside Sales by Design. And I'm so grateful to be here today on a sunny Monday morning with Ken, our sales guru that is joining us today, and everyone else that is joining us today as well. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. I know it's a Monday morning after a short week and a holiday and all, the stuff that's going on. So we appreciate it. We are recording this session just so everybody's aware, and we have Ken with us. I'm so excited. He's the founder of Turning Point Executive Search, as well as a few other things, and he has a wealth of knowledge to share with us today. So we're going to hear a little bit from Ken, and then we're going to go ahead and open it up for some Q&A on our sales career at the end of the day. So Ken, if you could kind of share with us a little bit about your background, and then we'll kind of dive into some Q&A.
Sure. Thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for the chance to talk to the group this morning. It's good to see everybody or hear everybody. So I appreciate that. So as Dionne mentioned, my name is Ken Schmitt, and I'm actually in San Diego. So I'm in North County, Carlsbad, San Diego. We have quite a few clients actually throughout Southern California, up in LA, as well as Orange County and San Diego too. About 60% of our business is Southern California, and about 40% is the rest of the country. But I've been in San Diego here pretty much my entire life. I went to middle school and high school and college here. Lived here in Carlsbad now for 27 years. I just absolutely love it here. So I feel very, very spoiled to be, even with the fires going on, and as crazy as California can be sometimes, it's still a great place to live. So I've been in the recruiting business. A little bit about my professional background. I've been in the recruiting business for over 22 years. I got in back in 1998, and I actually got the job in this industry through an ad in the newspaper when there actually used to be ads in the newspaper. So a long time ago, obviously. And just fell in love with the industry. I just love the chance to talk to so many great people, and I get to learn from so many industries and so many individuals about how they handle their position, whether it be leadership or individual contributor. I actually started my company 13 years ago. So like I said, 22 years in recruiting, but 13 years as Turning Point. And we first started off back in 2007 as mainly focusing on accounting and finance recruiting. That's what I had done immediately prior at my last company. But I quickly decided to make a change, and it was such a saturated, kind of a commoditized market as far as accounting and finance recruiting went, that I wanted to make a little bit of a different approach, and also have a bit more of a niche as well. So I ended up pivoting and rebranding. I was naively thinking it would take about 6 months or so to rebrand my company, but it took a lot longer than that, about 1.5 years. So then we started in 2011 and 2012 in earnest, focusing on sales and marketing predominantly, which is about 2/3 of our recruiting, sales and marketing, with the other third being what we call executive leadership and operations. So president, CEO, board member type positions also. So it's been a lot of fun. I've been an entrepreneur since a very, very young age, when I started selling candy on the school bus in middle school, until I was told by the bus driver to stop doing that. Yeah, exactly. What's wrong with being an entrepreneur when you're 11 years old, right?
Nothing.
Exactly right. So yeah, my dad was a Jack in the Box franchisee growing up, and so I grew up in a self-employed, kind of an independent business, if you will, household, and learned a lot from both my parents. My mom actually was a real estate agent for a long time, also. So yeah, being an entrepreneur kind of runs through my veins for sure.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. And every time we talk, I learn something new about you, which I just absolutely love.
Thanks.
It's fun, like you were saying, right? You always have these opportunities. So the other thing too to keep in mind is Ken also runs a group called Sales Marketing Leadership Alliance. There's a group in Orange County. There's a group in San Diego. So if you're looking for some networking opportunities, I highly encourage you to connect with Ken on LinkedIn. Check out his groups, whether you're in Orange County, San Diego, wherever you may be. So they are super high quality for sure. So, part of owning our career is definitely getting out there, right? And kind of putting ourselves out there and meeting folks and all that good stuff. So Ken, so that's kind of a good segue into some other questions, right? So what are you kind of seeing out in the market from trends, companies you're talking to? I know we were, before I had a break to go get my son on his new classroom, right? But what are you seeing from a trends perspective out there? Number one, I think quantitatively, right? And then qualitatively, what are organizations looking for as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, it certainly has, I mean, no surprise, it's been kind of a tale of kind of three different tales over the course of the first, 3 quarters of this year. Q1, things were humming along after a record year in 2019 for a lot of businesses, including ours. Q1, January, February, and the first part of March was fantastic, right? So that's kind of, phase one of this trilogy of this year, right? That's crazy as it's been. So that was great. And at that point, it was still very much a candidate-driven market. Whether you are in transition or currently employed, either one, companies were realizing that the skill set they're looking for, namely, inside sales and outside sales, but around analytics as well, folks that had experience in SaaS and enterprise software, cybersecurity was really big also, of course, biotech, medtech was always really big. So in Q1, the candidates were in the driver's seat, right? Unemployment rate, if you remember, it was only 6 months ago, we were at an unemployment rate of just around 3%. It was about 2.9% here in San Diego, which is just mind-boggling to think it was only 6 months ago. So it was definitely a candidate-driven market, and companies were having to really go to the extra mile, if you will, to not only attract but also then compel somebody to make a job change, and the compensation levels were reflecting that. So then we go into April or end of March, where everything happened, right? And Tom Hanks, his wife got COVID. The March Madness was shut down. The NBA was shut down all on March 11th, and that's where the bad news started. So then we had April, May, and June. Q2 was really rough for the whole industry on the recruiting side, especially. We didn't actually launch any new searches at all during the second quarter. So it was dismal, to say the least. Luckily, we got one of the PPP loans, which did what it was supposed to do, which was great, kind of help us tide over for that time frame. But yeah, so in that time frame, there was very little hiring going on. There was still some happening in very specialized industries, like companies that were defense related or deemed essential businesses, or those that were in biotech and certainly in pharmaceuticals with the vaccine research as well. But by and large, the majority of folks out there were, really kind of not looking for work if you were employed as a candidate, and B, companies were not looking to hire people. Things were just completely on hold. Then as Q3 started, so in kind of July and then August, things started to loosen up a little bit. And, certainly we were coming off a very low bottom. I think the peak of the unemployment rate was about 20% or 19.5%. Now it's down to 8.4% nationally. So it's a huge improvement. We still have a long way to go. It's still, again, almost triple what it was back in February, but at least we're heading in the right direction. And so now in this third phase of this trilogy, if you will, companies are grappling with a couple of different things. They're trying to figure out how to bring people on board in terms of the actual hiring process. Right, so everything has gone virtual, of course. A few companies are looking at in-person interviews for the final rounds, but it is very much case by case. But companies are realizing they need to upgrade their sales teams in a lot of ways. It's funny how inside sales was always an important aspect of every company, but I think it was always kind of seen historically as a stepping stone to outside sales. That is no longer the case. I mean, everybody in outside sales is no longer outside, right? They're all inside. No one's traveling anywhere to customer sites. No one's going to trade shows, obviously. So the whole lead generation process, if you will, and pipeline has been completely turned on its head. So that has brought a much bigger and much more, I think, kind of well-deserved and late to the party spotlight and focus on inside sales, which has been great. So that's been a very positive, kind of a trend that we're starting to see here in Q3. But yeah, so demand is improving. Still a long way to go, but companies are starting to hire again.
Absolutely, Ken. I would thank you for that. And it's interesting because some of the clients and prospects that I was talking with this year, they said, yeah, Dionne, we want to stand up an inside sales team, and then, right? Oh, my outside sales team is all inside. Can you help us, right? Can you do some crash courses on teaching our outside to do inside work? And so, the lines for sales outside and inside have definitely been blurring over the years. And, the rise of the hybrid role has definitely definitely come up
Mm-hmm.
hot and fast.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
sure.
we did a, so the group that Dionne mentioned before, my Sales and Marketing Leadership Alliance group, we do 2 virtual interviews very similar to this every month. And the one that we did actually a week ago was with Angie Barnes. She is the SVP of sales for Navco, actually that Dionne introduced me to way back when. And so anyway, so she has a team of 25 people who are largely outside sales, pre-COVID. Now they're all 100% inside sales. And so we're having a pretty in-depth conversation on that in that event that we did, talking about how do you kind of retrain in terms of their mindsets, but also looking at different metrics and different expectations around inside sales versus outside sales. And so it was a very interesting conversation around how they did that. And so it's worked very well. The vast majority of her team have done phenomenal, and have really kind of stepped up and really kind of made that adjustment. But at the same time, it's not easy. So it's not for everybody.
Yeah, it definitely takes some good, strong leadership at the end of the day. And I
Right.
don't, at the risk of being controversial, there's a part of me that is fed up to hear with the word empathy at this point. I think it's about compassion and thoughtfulness, right? Which are maybe synonyms, I don't know. But I think it's the compassion and thoughtfulness to go, holy bananas, this is truly an unprecedented time. So how do we equip our people to be successful? Right,
Right.
at the end of the day. So yeah, we all know this is crazy, to issue the understatement of the year. So
Right.
when you're talking with folks, Ken, what are some tips that you give to some of your candidates, right, in this market now? Because it's crazy, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It hasn't changed that much from when I was giving advice back in, let's say, 08, 09, 2010, also
Okay.
the last really, really big downturn, with one exception. Back then, people were able to go out and attend networking events. And that was a big part of making connections, building out your network, getting that visibility for yourself and that personal branding. Today, of course, there are no face-to-face networking events. Everything is virtual. And there's still some value there, but it's not as powerful, it's not as impactful as being face-to-face. So it just takes that much extra effort, if you will, and a more concerted and kind of well-designed strategy for your job search. So even coming from me as a recruiter, I tell people all the time, you're most likely to get a position not through a recruiter, but actually through your own network. That's the case in good times, in recession times, in COVID times, no matter what it is, that's always the case. About 12 to 15% of people get their position through a recruiter, right? And it typically actually drops below that the higher level you are, right? But about 12, 15%, give or take. Depending upon the position, around 10% or so, give or take, will come from just a cold application to a job post. Right, so that means the remainder of those numbers, call it 75% of positions, are being filled not through the more typical or kind of top of mind resources. Instead, they're being filled through networking connections.
Yeah.
And so again, that's the same even in today in a COVID world. You've got to get out there and build out your network, and especially in areas that you don't already have a deep network already existing. So if you are, a VP of inside sales, for example, or you're a CSO or a CMO, you've got to build a network of people in the financial world, right? With CFOs, you've got to connect with heads of IT and heads of operations and heads of marketing as well. And you've got to really diversify your network to have the biggest impact out there. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Secondly, I would also say that you've got to make sure that when you do have a chance to have whether it's an informational interview or an actual interview, that your message is crystallized, right? You know in a very succinct way who you are, what your expertise is, what value you're going to bring to the table, and why that employer should hire you, or why that referral source should be referring you. Right. A great example is I talk to people that are they're so afraid of closing any doors, they try to leave all doors open, but it winds up just really diluting their brand. Right. I always joke, and I have this phrase I'll say, if you try to be everything to everybody, you wind up being nothing to no one. Right. So I mean, you've got to really be out there and have a crystallized message about what you're doing. So I'm a great inside sales leader. I'm better in a small to mid-market company, privately held. I've done great work for companies that are either family owned or that are private equity owned, for example. I know that I'm much better in a services environment versus a product manufacturing environment. I know I'm really good if I'm able to work with a team that is very collaborative with marketing. I don't do well in an organization where there's those silos, where marketing is over here, sales is over there, and they never communicate. So really taking some time to really kind of do a personal inventory and figure out, in the jobs that you've had in the past, which ones have you liked the most? Why did you enjoy those? And why did you thrive in those positions? But then using that as part of your story when you're talking to prospective employers and other referral sources also.
Gotcha. And then so I think that is great advice, right? Getting kind of rehearsing our talk track in our head and who we are and writing it out and what's kind of your testimony at the end of the day.
Right.
And what do you recommend from a medium perspective? Are we reaching out on LinkedIn? Because that's gone gangbusters at this point, right? So everybody's talking on LinkedIn, and for better or worse, right? So is it LinkedIn? What do you suggest?
Yeah, I think for this group around inside sales, certainly LinkedIn is the place to be, and it's always been that way for more than a decade now, a couple of decades. But yeah, so it's the place to be. But again, examples. I'm amazed at how often I will get messages from somebody that I've never spoken to before, I've never had any communication with, and it's good that they're using a personal, customized message to reach out to me to connect. That's the good news. The bad news is that very first interaction is an attempt to sell me something.
Right.
And I don't even know them. I haven't looked at their profile. I mean, for them to say, hey, Ken, we're a marketing agency that provides great lead generation for recruiters like you. When can we talk? Here's a link to my calendar. I'm like, wow, I don't even know who you are. Never mind asking me out on a date, right? I mean, so let's kind of wait and do things step by step here. So make sure in a job seeker mode, right, whether it's in stealth mode or whether you're currently in transition, that you're not jumping 3 steps ahead, right? Because you're going to really turn people off. So if your first message is, hey, let's connect, I'm looking for a job, can you help me get a job at ABC company? That's going to really turn them off. If instead you talk about how I'm expanding my network, I've been in Southern California for quite some time, and I'm looking to really, leverage my network, but also expand and share it with others, would love to connect with you. Or, try to find ways to personalize it. I see that we have, 15 shared mutual connections. Some of those folks, I name a couple, are really close friends of mine or colleagues of mine, would love to chat with you about how you know them. Yeah. Or, hey, I see you went to school in the Midwest. So did I. I went to school in Illinois. You went to school in Indiana. Great. Let's chat about that. Something you can do to personalize things, right? That's gonna be a much more compelling reason for someone to respond and then be willing to talk to you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because I think I probably have done that, and I've made that.
Oh, we all have. Trust me, you're not alone.
You know what I mean? But I think there's something to be said for that, as far as not small talk, but building rapport, right? Which is interesting, because really good salespeople and high achievers have a propensity for action. And so this piece of advice is really about slowing down, right? At the end of the day.
Exactly.
And being able to, again, be thoughtful, right? So I think that's
and put yourself in the other person's shoes. I mean, how would you feel if you were, a VP of inside sales at a company working 10, 11 hours a day, and you get this random message from somebody asking to connect and sending you, their calendar link because they want to get a job at your company, and you have no idea who they are? That would be a real turnoff for most of us, if not all of us. And so, really thinking about how is this going to look? What's the perception that I'm putting out there as I make this request to connect? And I also talk about, it's got to be a two-way street, right? Yes, you are in job search mode. We understand that. But if you don't have anything to offer to them, what's their incentive to reciprocate and respond to you? So if you talk about how I have a big network, I want to share it. I've talked to other people in your industry. I have some interesting insights and market trends that I've been hearing about. Would love to hear how you're tackling those trends also. Let's connect. That's it's more of a conversation versus an outreach for just them to help you get a job. You want to really avoid that.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point too, right? Is sometimes we do step one, like you were talking about, which is get our testimony. And we forget, though, to kind of bridge that to, here's how we can use that to have a conversation, right, at the end of the day. Right. So what about, you mentioned the referrals and all that good stuff too. So, in your experience and your wealth of experience, how does that work and work well?
As far as just getting referral into an organization, into a company? Yeah. So, I mean, it depends upon the organization, right? And it depends upon somebody who is, if the person is willing to do networking. And usually you can kind of tell there's a few, kind of signals if they have more than 500 connections in LinkedIn. I wish LinkedIn would adjust that because a lot of people have more than 500. But in any case, if they have less than 500, they're probably not as engaged, or they don't have the time to be as engaged with networking. But 500 is certainly kind of that threshold. It's a good place to start. If you also have a number, ideally a dozen or so of mutual connections, that's a good place to start too. Those folks are probably more likely to network also. So when you're asking for those introductions, when you're asking for that kind of market intel, make sure you come to the conversation having already done your research. You don't want to go into that discussion and say, so do you have any jobs open that I'd be a fit for? That's putting all the responsibility on the shoulders of the other person. You're the one reaching out. It's up to you. It's your responsibility to do all that research beforehand. So look at the company, if they have any job postings, look and get a feel for what the makeup of their inside sales team is. In most cases, you can do a search and figure out, just punch in inside sales for ABC company or just sales in general and get a general idea for the structure. And that'll help you as you have that conversation to figure out where you might fit in there. Also, again, as I mentioned before, really understand what your value proposition is. Otherwise, you're very unlikely to get any kind of referral, if you will. Another thing to think about also, which a lot of people kind of forget about, is that a lot of companies will actually have already set up employee referral bonus programs, right? So it's not always easy to figure that out beforehand, but keep that in mind when you're having a conversation. If you're trying to encourage somebody that works at a company that you want to work at, you're trying to encourage them to refer you in, ask them, hey, by the way, do you guys have an employee referral program if I'm able to get my foot in the door that might help you out with your boss, or a cash bonus, that kind of thing? And most folks will say, oh yeah, I remember seeing something about that come across the transom of my internal emails at some point. So bring that up as certainly as a financial incentive for them to help you out. But really make sure that you are truly a fit for that organization. Don't do the old, as we kind of say in the recruiting world, don't try to put a square peg in a round hole, right? Because you're asking this person to go out on a limb to help you through a referral or by walking your resume over to a hiring manager. So make sure that you're not asking them to put their own credibility on the line, if you will, because if you are, they're not going to move very far. So ask for introductions, ask for referrals. Tell them what your goals are, the kind of role that you're looking to get into. And I'm a big believer in rather than saying I need a job, can you help me? It's instead you want to say I'm looking for these kinds of introductions to these kinds of people. Because if you're asking me, hey, I need a job, can you help me? I'm racking my brain to figure out who do I know that's hiring. And right now it might be kind of slim pickings. But instead, if you say I'm looking to talk to other CSOs, or I'm looking to talk to other CMOs out there within the biotech space. Now I'm able to kind of shrink down my mental Rolodex to figure out, okay, who do I know in that arena that I can introduce this person to, regardless of whether they're actually hiring right now or not. It's just a matter of introduction, and you want to get that conversation going because there's a lot of jobs out there. I mean, it is in good times and bad. You hear about that, kind of the confidential job market, if you will, right? Where a huge majority of jobs that get filled are never posted anywhere. So you'll never see it on LinkedIn or anyplace else. The jobs are created once the hiring manager meets the right kind of person and they realize, hey, I was thinking about adding this kind of a role to our organization, to our department. Now that I've talked to you, you could be a good fit for that. Yeah. So you want to get those introductions to people, not just to jobs.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, right? And I think too, most people are happy and eager to help, right? So I think to your point, making it easy for them and just talking about, hey, let's do some networking calls and all that good stuff. So right. I agree. And then, so I have two other questions, but you're also talking about, don't leave anything blank on your LinkedIn profile. And then make sure that it's concise and I think specific.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, well, that's the challenge with LinkedIn. I mean, with a resume, you obviously customize your resume for every job that you're applying to. Yeah. And you should be doing that. If you're not, you really should be, right? With LinkedIn, you've only got one shot. You can't customize your LinkedIn profile and have 10 different LinkedIn profiles. You've got one. So you don't want to pigeonhole yourself so much that nobody else outside of your current industry is going to ever look at your background. And a good example of that is people that are using too much industry jargon, right? There's a lot of acronyms and things that they think the whole world knows about, but in reality, only people that are in that specific, very small space understand. So make sure it's general enough for everybody to understand. But at the same time, don't make it so general that it sounds very kind of cookie cutter, where you're not truly differentiating yourself. You've got to be able to kind of pinpoint and highlight what your unique, skill set is and why you're going to stand out among the rest. So yeah, so LinkedIn profiles are really, really important. You've got to have a picture there, of course. I'm still amazed when I come across folks that actually don't have a picture, but you need to have a picture there, and it shouldn't be your Facebook picture with you in your surfboard or you holding a glass of wine, right? It should be a professional picture that's gonna kind of indicate that you're a professional individual with some maturity, right? So have that. Obviously, you want to customize your headline, of course. You want to have a narrative there in terms of your summary, and don't just put your company name and job title, but fill it out. Include 3 to 5 to 7 at the most bullet points that really kind of mirror your resume in terms of your skill set and accomplishments.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on all of that, Ken. And so, what about folks that are kind of making a transition, right? So we see that a lot of times, especially, inside sales typically will be the farm team for the rest of the organization. So you've got folks going from sales to product management, product marketing, inside to outside, inside or sales to customer success, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, or even sales to sales engineer,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, any thoughts on those transitions and kind of how to masterfully maneuver?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, it kind of depends on, if you're working right now in one of those areas and you want to make a transition to a different one, that's the easiest way to do it, of course, because then you can ideally go to your boss and say, hey, look, I'm looking to get some additional experience in other spaces or other sectors or other departments as well. Can I take on some extra work? Now, you don't want to ask that question unless you are doing the main part of your job already and doing it well. So if you're not doing well, don't ask for more work, right? But if you are doing well, then certainly you can do that internally and try to get in some other departments and get some visibility also and personal branding with other departments also. If you're in transition looking for work, then it's a little bit more difficult because your resume is going to be seen as an inside salesperson doing this. If you're saying now I want to get into the marketing space or I want to get into sales engineering or customer success, it's a little bit more challenging, but I encourage you to do a couple things. First, make sure that your resume is using some of the language, if you will, some of the jargon that is relevant for that other department that you want to get into, right? So sales metrics are always going to be relevant, but if you're going into success, sales success or customer success, there are other metrics depending upon the company that might also be relevant. So include that there for sure. So that's a big part of it. Make sure that it's kind of it speaks to both audiences, if you will. Talk about, on your resume, how you collaborated with the customer success team in your organization. Talk about how you did some joint project with product development, whatever it may be. Really use those keywords, those buzzwords in the resume if you're looking to make that transition. Secondly, we talked about networking in general, but I didn't really give you much insight about how to decide who to go after, right? If you're looking to diversify your network, then you should come up with a list of the kinds of people that you don't already know. As I mentioned before, different functions, different industries, what have you. But if you know that you've been in inside sales for 6 years and now you want to get into product development, you should really be focusing your networking efforts on getting a hold of and getting in touch with product development leaders. And that's actually a bit of an easier way to make that or to request that introduction, because you can simply say in your outreach, hey, I'm making a transition from inside sales to product development. I've done a number of projects internally at my last company with product development. I would love to pick your brain for 10 minutes, right? Don't make it seem like it's gonna be an hour-long conversation, but I wanna pick your brain for 10 minutes. I know you're really busy. I have a couple of key questions to ask you about your group and kind of what you look for in that group. That's a great way to help out. And not everybody, but most people will say, sure, I have 10 minutes to spend. I'm happy to give you my insights and my 2 cents. And it may go well beyond 10 minutes, but at least you're only asking them to commit to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ken. I think that specific request is good. And it kind of ties to what you were talking about earlier as far as, hey, do you know anybody hiring?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one of those things where it's like, I'm sure I do, but right now I don't.
Right, sure. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And so it's how do we kind of set the stage for that
Hmm.
conversation, right?
Right,
So
exactly.
Hannah, yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, man alive, come at me with, hey, I saw this job at this person, or
Hmm.
something that tells me that you've done your homework. You know
Right,
what I mean?
exactly.
So we can have that meaty conversation
Right.
versus, oh, hang on, you're looking for a job. Let me go do a quick, LinkedIn search.
Yeah, right,
So,
exactly. And again,
uh,
don't put that responsibility on the other person. It should be on your shoulders. So you have
yeah.
to come to the discussion with questions in mind, having done your research, knowing the company, and being prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Edwin and Hannah, what questions do you have for Ken? So, first off, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to keep talking, but you should be thinking about your question if you don't have it already. Connect with Ken, reach out and talk with him for sure, right? So, he should be somebody you should know just in general. So what questions do you have, or what can we talk about that we haven't talked about that would be helpful for you? Go ahead, Edwin.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I actually, was talking to a recruiter and they really wanted me to jump in and so forth. But I just think it's a bad time to be switching jobs right now. And I do my due diligence, do research for the company and research my future boss. But I always worry because, like, where I'm at, I have a job for life if I wanted to. Um, but in jumping, even though the pay was going to be a lot better, but what if they fire me 6 months from now? I mean, it doesn't matter if they're paying you 30% more. If they fire you in 3 months, 6 months, and it may not be my fault. Maybe that it's a crazy boss or crazy company. What can you do to avoid that, to mitigate that, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great scenario. I mean, and I think we saw the level of candidate kind of risk tolerance go from an all-time high where people were like, sure, I'll make a job change back in the first quarter because they were getting significant bumps in compensation. They weren't worried about being fired 6 months later. And here we are now where the level of risk tolerance has dropped dramatically. We say more people are risk averse as opposed to being risk tolerant for the reason that you just outlined, Edwin. That's a great example. So I would say, if you said what you said is true, and you have a job for life if you want it, then really it's going to come down to you doing a professional inventory and figuring out if you did make a change, why would you make it? What are you not getting in your job right now that another job could potentially give to you, right? I used to have this exercise I'd walk my coaching clients through years ago. It was called the get to and the have to. So it's literally just two columns on a page, and if you're working, it's easier to do it. In the course of your day, make a list on one side of the things that you get to do, the things that are excited about, that you gravitate towards, that you're like, oh, great, today I get to do ABC, right? Being on the phone with a customer, closing a deal, whatever it is. What are the things that you get to do that really get you jazzed up, that keep you engaged and excited in your job? And it might also be things that are outside of the job scope, but things like, pre-COVID, your commute, for example, or your engagement and your connection with other employees. How much appreciation do you get, or acknowledgement do you get from your boss and from your peers, right? And then also compensation, right? How am I in terms of my compensation versus the marketplace? That's one column. Other column is what's called have to. What are the things that you have to do? We all have things that we have to do. Even Dionne and I, that we own our own companies, there are things that we have to do that it's not our favorite, but we've got to do them. Bookkeeping comes to mind for me, right? Yeah. So what are the have tos? Things that are more draining than energizing. At the end of that, so do that for a week. Just kind of get a sense for how it looks. And at the end of that week, if you look at your list and you realize that I've got a lot more things on the get to side than I do on the have to side, then maybe you should stay put. Maybe you realize, you know what, this job is not perfect. No job is perfect, but there's a lot more positives than there are negatives. If the reverse is true and you realize that your have to column is now on page 3 and your get to column is still on page 1, that's an issue, right?
Yeah.
And so now it's time to really think about, okay, so obviously this is not where I want to be long term. And even if you are a little bit more risk averse, it might be time to start looking out there. And even if you get to a point where you're interviewing with a client or a prospective employer, you're not obligated to take the job. So you don't feel like you have to do it. but don't go into a job search and interviewing unless you're serious about it, unless you can see yourself changing jobs, because otherwise you're just wasting the time of the recruiter, your own time, and the new employer's time also.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think
And
about
that? I don't know, does that help a little bit in terms of getting a feel for the
a little bit, you know, in the past, I used to do like, what are the KPIs right up front, you know, let's agree on those. And you know, on good times, I used to ask, what is a signing bonus? Because I always figure if they pay up front, it's harder for them to let go later. And you kind of set it up for just the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have a couple follow-up. So I've been a regional sales manager for quite a while now, 12, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if I move, I would like to move to like a national sales manager or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But how do I make that jump? I mean, because I'm pigeonholed. Every recruiters call me like, yeah, we need a regional sales manager. I'm like, same thing I'm doing now. Why would I jump?
Right. Yeah, so I mean, that's a good point. No, it's a very good point. And you don't want to leave just for the sake of leaving, because if it's not going to get you something that's obviously better than where you are right now, in this case, title or responsibility, then there's no point in making a change. There really isn't. Now, there are some companies where, you know, they just have a protocol where you come in as a regional and then you get bumped up to national, and they say, you know what, here's where we are today. I need you to come as a regional, but the expectation is that by year end or by the end of Q1, we need to have somebody in a national role. And so you will be seriously considered for that national role. There's never a guarantee, right? If they guarantee it, you should be a little skeptical, right? Because no one knows what's going to happen 6 months from now, especially these days. But if there is that ladder, if you will, where they're going to get you to that point, then that might be a reason to do it. But otherwise, yeah, I would say, you know, think about the reasons behind why you want to go national. You know, make sure you're comparing apples to apples also, because, you know, a national sales manager role in a company with 10 people is very different than in a company like CoreLogic, right? Or FICO or whatever. So make sure you are comparing apples to apples in terms of what the scope of the role is, regardless of the title, because you may actually get a regional role in a larger company and your region doubles or triples in size just by virtue of the size of the company. So I would encourage you to not focus so much on just the title, but really look at the kind of the full picture and the full scope of the role.
Cool.
I like it.
Yeah.
So that's it.
And you should also feel like you have the trust of whatever recruiter you're working with, whoever it might be, or it might be several. If they're trying to push you on something that you already told them you're not interested in, you know, just take some time to assess that relationship. No recruiter should try to sell you into a job. That's just not, that's not good for, at the end of the day, it's not their career, it's your career and your life. So it's got to be the right fit for you.
Yeah. Wise words, Ken. Wise words. Oh, I love it. Hannah, anything that we can talk about or address for you here?
Hi guys, I'm new to sales, so this is my first year in a sales role. I was actually a recruiter the year before that, so it was kind of relatable what you were saying, Ken, of everything when it comes to LinkedIn especially. I'm still learning and trying to navigate through it and really trying to find messages that that do have a response to it, and where I'm not coming off in a negative way, I would say, where I'm trying to shove it down a potential customer's throat. So I've been taking notes on it. I don't really have any follow-up questions, I would say, but I thought the information was great, and taking those different tactics of making it short and sweet was really helpful. So I really appreciate it.
Great. Yeah. I'm looking at both of your LinkedIn profiles as you're both talking. So, and, you know, kudos to you both. I mean, Edwin and Hannah, both of you guys have, you know, they're both well laid out. You have a lot of good information there. Your college information is there. I would say that I think in actually both cases, there's not a customized headline. Okay. And I'll bring this up just because a lot of people don't realize that you can and that you should customize it. So, you know, right below your name, if you don't customize it, the default, if you will, is your current position or most recent position. So Hannah, for example, yours says fire service sales executives at Siemens, right? When you go in to edit your profile, when you hit edit, right, there'll be a little like pencil next to your name and then also right below it. That headline is really important. That headline is the first thing that recruiters see, that hiring managers see, that private equity firms see, or venture capitalists see. And that's really going to allow you to differentiate yourself. So you want to use that real estate. You have about 140 characters, so similar to a tweet. You want to really customize that with terms that are going to make you stand out. You don't want to use the word leader because that's pretty generic. You don't want to say professional, right? That's generic also. But things like, sales, proven sales performer, proven sales leader, private equity, family-run businesses, public company experience, IPO experience, acquisition experience, experience running a team, or you can mention, SaaS software, you can mention revenue size. So those are the things that are going to really it's like a really small mini version of your resume headline, if you will. So I encourage you both to adjust that, and that will certainly get you on more radar screens so that if you do look to make a change at some point, you're going to pop up in more places than you might otherwise.
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you.
Sure. And then Hannah, for example, I know you went to LMU. My wife went there as well, and I know that she's a therapist, a psychologist. But the LMU network is huge. I mean, you're still in the general vicinity of where they are, obviously in LA. But that's a really good resource for you to tap into for networking and for building out your team also, or building out your network of contacts also. So if you haven't already, as you're doing a confidential search at some point, definitely you can look in and see what who you might know or who you want to know based on the LMU connections also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I will take advantage of that for sure.
Sure.
Yeah, alumni connections are huge, whether it's the school or companies you've worked at, for sure.
Exactly.
And a lot of people are just open to networking, right? Hey, how are you? There's a little bit of that nostalgia that goes a long way. And I would say too, as we're all kind of moving and grooving throughout our day, just keep each other in mind, right?
Yep.
So
Exactly.
Ken is by far and away one of the most integrity-filled people I've ever had the opportunity to work with, right?
Thank you.
So, yeah, Ken, thank you. Because I think it's important, right? So whether it's sales or recruiting, right, there seems to be this interesting feel, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think to what you were saying too is, this is our career, these are our relationships. And so, as we're going about our day, do we have opportunities to connect with and for other people, right? And so, because I think anytime we're going into a networking conversation or, hey, I need something, I don't know about you all, but it's a little bit hard for me to go and ask for something. And so I think if we turn that around a little bit and keep in mind, are there 5 connections I can make for other people this week?
Right.
Right. So that's also something else we can do. And Hannah, with you and Siemens, and Edwin, you as an RSM, that's something to keep in mind as well, right? So if you're seen as this person who is a gateway to other people, right, you're seen as a resource. So it just makes it so much easier, right? Yep. Hey, I'm calling you to do some networking and have some ideas, and here's how I can help. But oh, by the way, I know a lot of people too. So how can I help you? Or I noticed on your website that you're hiring this or you're doing that, right? So it just, again, it kind of goes a long way to that compassion and thoughtfulness and going into a conversation, to what Ken was saying, making it a two-way street, right? So
and being prepared. Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah. And both of you, I mean, obviously Hannah, you a little bit more so, but you both work for sizable companies. So also don't hesitate to research and then reach out to other former employees, right? So people that used to work at Siemens or what have you. As long as you feel comfortable that you can, confide in them, obviously, but they've already, made the leap. They've already changed jobs, and they have that common connection, with that same employer. So I would recommend that you look at them also if you're especially if you're trying to find people that are in a different category. You're trying to get into product development, as we talked about. If there are people that are former Siemens employees that also happen to go to LMU that also are in product development, wow, that's a home run, right? So those are the folks you should reach out to if that's your target and your kind of focus.
Yeah. And I think Ken, what I hear too is it's all about the connection and it's all about the relationship, and again, kind of making it that two-way street. So showing up and doing our homework and being thoughtful
Right.
and having a plan and being prepared. It's like preparing for a sales call, right? We wouldn't, God willing, hopefully, go in winging it. So it's the same concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And as Dionne mentioned, feel free to reach out to me with any other questions, or just to connect on LinkedIn. Also, I'm happy to be a resource and a sounding board wherever I can.
Yeah. Ken, you are amazing. Are you still doing that individual coaching or no?
No, not anymore. Actually, we stopped it because recruiting got so busy in 2011 and 2012, especially. We just didn't have the bandwidth for it. So now we refer coaches out that do that work better than we can.
Yeah.
And we actually just took all that information and put it on our website. So it's all there for free. Resume writing. We do a lot of blogs and, kind of best practices in job search. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you do. And it's amazing content and some of the best out there for sure. So again, like Ken was saying, you guys will also, thank you so much for joining us today. Ken, thank you so much for your time.
Sure. Thank you.
We appreciate that. So we also, after this, you will see a follow-up email from me thanking. You will see the recording, and any links to Ken's website will come from him. I encourage you to definitely connect with each other on this call and connect with Ken for sure. And then in that email, you will also see some upcoming other additional live events you might find interesting. We've got one on networking again on LinkedIn with Bryn Tillman. We've got another one on what is your sales process. I don't know about you, Ken, but sometimes that's a question that comes up from a sales leader to a salesperson, or a board to a sales leader that says, hey, what's your sales process? Right? Do you have a framework? Do you have a system? Do you have a methodology?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is no, that's kind of a problem. We also have Eric Reifenberg joining us for a session on negotiation, which will be good. So Ken, I thank you so much. I appreciate this. You guys will all see the recording. It will be in the SalesClass platform as well. So hopefully you've all been able to join there. And if any parting words, Ken?
No, I guess I would just say, both of you are in a good position, right? You're both working right now. It doesn't sound like either one of you absolutely hate your job, so that's good. So just, remember that you are in the driver's seat. Even though things are a little crazy out there, there still are a lot of companies that are hiring. Like I said, we're starting to see that even on our side, on the recruiting side too. So it's not as bad as what it was, 2, 3, 4 months ago, certainly. But just kind of know what you want, right? Don't just jump for the sake of jumping, and also make sure that it's more than just compensation. Because at the end of the day, it's nice to get more pay, but if you're miserable in your job, I don't care how much you're getting paid, life's too short. If anything that COVID has shown us all, life is too short, and you shouldn't take anything for granted. So if you don't enjoy your job, don't just take more money to do another horrible job.
Amen to that. Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, again, everybody, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. You can go ahead and leave the meeting now, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Thank you both.